Hi everybody, this is Jennifer. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm talking about what I've been reading. So maybe I might like to start with a random piece of nonsense. This week I got the most random song stuck in my head. I don't know if you're familiar with the band Dishwalla. In 1996 they put out this single called Counting Blue Cars, and it kind of was everywhere, and I think they're pretty much considered a one-hit wonder. I don't think they had any other real big hits. However, they did have another single. I think this came out in '94 before that, but they were on a Carpenter's tribute band album called If I Were a Carpenter, and it had all different kinds of artists on it, mostly rock and alternative. I think Sonic Youth is on there. Jeanette Napolitano from Concrete Blonde, Sheryl Crow, just tons of different people are on this thing. And the band Dishwalla did a cover of It's Going to Take Some Time. And I've had that song stuck in my head at various times all week. And I don't think I've heard the song since 96 or 97. And so I do not know, and I have no idea why. It's just random. This random song got stuck in my head. And yeah, so that's a random bit of nonsense before we started on the reading stuff. So let's go ahead and do that now. I finished a few books. Let's see. Let me turn my paper over. So I had 2 Springathon reads in the works. The first one for Springathon was Blue Thirst, Tales of Life Abroad by Lawrence Durrell. And this includes 2 transcripts of speeches he made at some California university whose name I can't remember. But one was about his early life on Corfu, and then the second one was just some tales from his diplomatic work in Alexandria. I ended up giving this 2 stars. I didn't think it was all that successful making the transition from a written work, to a written work from being a speech. And while there were pretty good there were some nice photos in there. A lot of them were photos that we didn't discuss in the writing. In the work, and then some photos he was discussing in the work were not included. So I didn't find it was all that successful, and I ended up giving it 2 stars. It was fine though. The second thing was A Naturalist at Large by Baron Heinrich, and I got two essays in before Springathon ended. I don't know that I found that all too successful either. I'm not sure that the essay is the best way to consume Baron Heinrich. I feel like maybe his larger works are best to start off with, but I'm still gonna give it a shot. I've stopped reading it for now. Maybe I'll hit it back up in November for nonfiction November. So that was how my Springathon went, which was not very well. So next thing I finished was Year of the Monkey by Patti Smith. And this starts, this is about a year that Patti spends going around. Her friend, what is his name? Sandy Perlman, he collapses from a brain issue, and he's in a coma for a long while. And she's processing that. She's also processing the ailment of her friend, the playwright Sam Shepard. And so she's going around these different towns, and there is a constant through line of dreams. She visits this place called the Dream Hotel. It's either she keeps referring to it as the Dream Hotel and it's actually the Dream Inn, or she keeps referring to it as the Dream Inn or as Dream Hotel. I can't remember which one. You know what? Hold on just a second. I don't need to remember. I have the book right here. It is the Dream Inn, so I believe she keeps referring to it as the Dream Hotel or the Dream Motel or something like that. There's a lot of dream motifs. Again, there's a lot of like monkey motifs. And there's this billboard that talks to her. I don't know. When stuff like that happens, it's almost always like a manifestation of somebody's inner voice talking through an inanimate object, as opposed to, you know, being the actual inanimate object. And she pretty much acknowledges this as an imaginary conversation, so it's not that bad. So I didn't like it as much as M Train, and I didn't like it as much as Just Kids, but I did quite like it. I listened to the audiobook while I was doing my walks around the neighborhood in the afternoon, and it was a very pleasant companion, I will say, on my walks. So I really appreciated it. So the next thing I finished was Unequal Affections, a Pride and Prejudice retelling by Laura Ormanston. This was an impulse. It was on Kindle for $1.99, and I'd been seeing it come through my like Goodreads feed and all that stuff at regular intervals for a while, and so I just decided to pick it up, and then I read it in 2 days. So I ended up giving this 3 stars. I liked the writing. I found it easy. I liked her writing style, and I found her writing style easy to read. However, I don't think it works as a Pride and Prejudice retelling for a couple of reasons. The first one being that, okay, let me explain what the premise is. This book starts in Hunsford, right at the point where Mr. Darcy is proposing for the first time. And instead of getting super angry and being like, instead of being like, I wouldn't have accepted you if you were the last man in the freaking world, she comes at it from a more pragmatic standpoint, and she's like, okay, what's going on here? I have to think about this. And eventually they get engaged, as opposed to waiting later. So instead of being more of a retelling, I kind of think it's more of a thought experiment of what would happen if that happened. However, I found it problematic because in order to start there, you have to make Elizabeth's character wildly different from what it actually is painted in Jane Austen's novel. You know, Elizabeth is pretty adamant about not marrying for financial gain. And so in order to make that leap of her agreeing to marry Darcy, I feel like her personality has to change too much. And so I didn't really see this as I had to separate it from being Elizabeth and Darcy in order to enjoy it. So I don't think it was successful as a Pride and Prejudice retelling. Also, another issue I had was the tone. I think it varied between 3 different tones, and one is kind of the bantery nature of Jane Austen's writing between Elizabeth and Darcy. The second one, there's also a more modern tone that doesn't sit quite right, and then there's also a moralistic tone. Well, anyway, it just varies from those 3 tones, so I found it inconsistent. Now, that said, I did find it a decent read. I did not hate it by any means. I just didn't find it entirely successful. All right, so next, a little bit more successful was Time Was Soft There, a Paris sojourn at Shakespeare and Company by Jeremy Mercer. This one was a book I picked up for my TBR Clear Out challenge thing in April, and I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. I mean, it's not perfect by any means. It is the memoir. It's the memoir of the author's year, not a year. I think it's less than a year. I think it's more like 6 to 8 months or whatever. Spending time in the Shakespeare and Company bookstore. The guy who runs this, George Whitman, is a communist bookstore owner in Paris. He's from America. And he has this bookstore. It's thoroughly unmodern. And there's like all these different rooms. There's all these different like beds and stuff. And he lets people sleep there and they just have to pitch in and write stuff, pretty much. So the author is from Canada, and he gets into a bit of trouble because, for one, he's a crime writer. Well, to start, he's a crime writer. And in order to get him, and he makes various like connections, including some criminal elements. And so he gets in the confidence of this one. And in order to get himself out of trouble with the police because of his heavy drinking and issues, he gives up some information about this guy, and he threatens him and breaks into his house, and he's like, I gotta get the hell out of here. So he scrapes up some money and he goes to Paris. And that's how he ends up at Shakespeare and Company. I really liked the cast of characters in here. Everybody seemed really interesting. His writing style was good. I can't find a way to really make myself approve of the author because, frankly, he's a little shady. But at the same time, this was a really fun read. If I had read this in my 20s, I feel like it would have been like an all-time favorite, but now I can't feel nearly as romantic about just not really having a real address and sleeping in a bookstore with like bed bugs and all that stuff. Just doesn't work for me quite as much as it would have 10 years ago. But yeah, I liked it. It was 4 stars, and I'm really glad I read it. That is the last book that I completely finished. What I am reading right now is my new audiobook is Mythos by Stephen Fry. His take on Greek myth. I'm just at the part right now where Zeus was able to be born thanks to the machinations of his mother, and he has released his brothers and sisters from Kronos, and they're about to have fights to see who are going to be the real Greek gods and the pantheon and all that good stuff. So that's what's happening there. I'm listening to the audiobook. It's being read by Stephen Fry. And that's really nice. I'm not sure that I'm totally down with his modern retelling of it. I am going to keep going with this because it is it's entertaining to hear him, tell the tales of these Greek gods and all that. So I haven't technically restarted reading these yet, but I'm still working on Confessions of an English Opium Eater by Thomas de Quincey and Imperium by Christian Krocht. I am determined. I am going to read a friggin' German book this year. Oh my goodness. I got halfway through Magic Mountain and I had to stop because it was it put all my reading on hold. But more on that later. And I've only got that far. I only got like a third of the way through Imperium before I hit pause on that to finish the Jeremy Mercer book. But today is the 24th, and I am going to read these. I'm going to get them finished by the time June starts because I have very special plans for June. So again, this one is about August Englehart. He sets sail for this island to colonize it and have a civilization based on coconuts, worship of the sun, vegetarianism. It does not end well for him. Haven't figured out how yet, but I was finally getting into a part where I was happy with it because I thought the first part was slow when I had to stop. So I'm going to get back to that. And I'm almost done with the first essay here, The Confessions of an English Opium Eater, and then I'm going to move on to De Profundis, Suspiria De Profundis, which is the second essay in here. And I was surprised, I surprised myself by liking this so much when I started it for Dewey's 24-hour readathon. So I am going to get back to that. So, what are my June plans? Okay, so this is very vague because there's going to be a separate video on it. But when it comes to future reading plans, June, July, and maybe August, I haven't confirmed with myself if August, it depends on how fast I get through all these books, but for June, July, and August, I am going to be rereading. 75% of my reading is going to be rereading. Yeah, so that's going to include some old favorites I'm going to be revisiting. Getting back familiar with some series that are going to be continuing. Yeah, so I'm going to be rereading a lot. I'm also going to be trying to dig into some more into the Magic Mountain. But yeah, there is going to be a proper TBR video on that. Alright, so that has been my reading for the last 2 weeks. Yeah, let me know how you've been doing. Let me know if you've had any random songs from 1994 stuck in your head. I don't know. Give me a shout out in the comments. See ya. Bye.